Welcome to Beyond Beauty with Stephanie. I'm your host, Stephanie Trimmel, licensed esthetician and owner of Belle Aesthetics in Magnolia, Texas. Wow, I can't even believe it's 2025 already. I can honestly say, though, I'm super excited for this year. I believe this year is my year. It's the year I will rise out of the ashes and flourish like never before. Praise Jesus for his unconditional love, guidance, grace, and patience, as I tend to learn things the hard way. Today, I just want to scratch the surface and share a little bit about who I am, specifically about Stephanie, and why I'm here recording this podcast. Honestly, I still can't believe I'm doing this. If you had told me a few years ago I'd be hosting a podcast, I would have laughed in your face. Being the center of attention is definitely not my thing. I'm not one to want all eyes or ears on me. But when God calls you to do something, you can't ignore it, and He's clearly led me here, so I'll follow His lead. After all, it's the least I can do for Him after all He's done for me, especially over this last year. So, a little bit about me. I'm a native Oregonian, born and raised in various parts of the state. We moved around a lot growing up, never staying in one place for too long. I was an only child until I was 8 years old, and then suddenly found myself with 3 younger sisters. I became the big sister fast, and let's just say it was a lot of energy to keep up with. And from that moment on, I had my work cut out for me. From a young age, I carried a heavy load of responsibility. I was responsible for most of our household chores and often found myself cooking meals for the family. It got to the point where my parents' friends and much of our extended family started calling me Cinderella. Honestly, I felt a deep connection to that story and couldn't help but admire how Cinderella had those adorable little mice by her side as a support system to help her through it all. Our home wasn't exactly a peaceful place. It was very high stress and, frankly, very toxic. There was a lot of anger, yelling, a lot of emotional abuse, and some physical abuse too. I lived with my mom and stepdad. He came into our lives when I was just 4 years old and was a part of it until the day he passed away when I was 22. If I really dove into the details of my childhood, I could create a whole other series of episodes just to cover it all, but that's not my goal here. I just want to set the stage and give you some context, but I'm not here to point fingers or make anyone feel bad. That said, understanding my past will help you understand where I'm coming from as we move through this journey together. My biological dad lived several hours away, so I didn't get to see him much growing up. I'd spend part of my summer breaks and other school breaks with him and my stepmom. Whenever my mom and stepdad would allow it, that is. Those times I spent with them were a peaceful escape for me. I used to daydream about living with them, having a clean home, nice things, that peaceful home where I could just be a kid when I was there. That was something I was robbed of in my childhood. I loved going shopping with my stepmom. She was so fashionable, always looked beautiful, and always had a smile on her face. She had such a good eye for clothes, and picking outfits out with her was such a treat. We had fun together. I also loved hanging out with my dad and his buddies from high school and my cousin Dustin, talking about fast cars and stories from when they were teenagers. There were some wild ones. My dad was, well, and still is, the best storyteller, very fun-loving and likable guy. I just felt included and cherished there, and that's something I didn't feel at home. Those moments were a bright spot in my childhood. Fast forward all these years later, I'm 45 now, and my stepmom is still one of the most important people in my life. She and my dad divorced over 20 years ago, but my stepmom has remained a constant in my world. She'll always be one of the most influential people in my life, no question. I still always enjoy my time with my dad to this day. He's easy to talk to and always full of wisdom, and if the zombies ever take over, he'll be the first person I run to. He taught me a lot about guns, ammo, and just how crooked our government can be. I used to poke fun at him, thinking and always saying, you're such a conspiracy theorist. But as the years have gone on and the older I've got, I've learned he's been right about, well, most of it. I had a lot of cousins growing up, and we were all pretty close. My cousins were like my best friends, especially Tamara, Norm, and Dustin. They were from opposite sides of my family, but when we were together, we knew how to have fun. Let me tell you, we made some great memories together. Memories I will cherish forever. As for my family, we struggled financially for pretty much my entire childhood. My stepdad was young and didn't have much of an education, so he worked whatever jobs he could, mostly at gas stations, later in logging mills, eventually working his way up to construction. He even started his own construction business. My mom was terrible with money. She'd spend faster than he could earn, and we were always living paycheck to paycheck. In fact, we didn't even make it to the next paycheck. That financial stress created even more tension in the house, making things harder than they already were. Lots of things went on through my younger years. If only I went into detail, I would probably have half of you wondering how I'm even here today. Those who do know the most detail from those years have asked me that on many occasions. The answer is always the same. I point to the sky and say, God. I didn't grow up in a Christian home. We didn't go to church, ever. There was drug use, abuse, and lots of other illegal activity that went on. I knew from a young age it wasn't right, but I never knew just how bad it was until I was off on my own and a parent myself. That's really when things hit me the hardest. Just thinking back on the things I had experienced and lived through, and wondering how, as a parent, could you possibly let that happen to your child. It's a hard one to swallow, but something I'm now working through with God and my counselor. My granny would pray and talk about God all the time, so I always knew there was a God, and the nights when things were really bad, I would lay in bed and cry and just talk to him. I would beg him to help me and ask him why I had to live like this. I always knew he was there, but didn't know much more than that. I was probably around the age of 11, maybe 12, when I had decided I couldn't possibly take any more and I wanted to end my life. I had just got another mental and physical beating yet again. The mental abuse was so bad, I just didn't want to live any longer. That's the crazy thing about abuse. The mental abuse is much harder to endure than the physical abuse. I feel that it affects you the rest of your life in ways we can't even explain or even realize most of the time. I went into our kitchen, grabbed the first bottle of pills I could find, and took all of what was in that bottle. I had had enough. I couldn't bear another moment. But God had different plans for me. Boy, was that a crazy night, or days. Honestly, I don't really remember much from that whole situation at all, except being in the hospital, hallucinating, having my stomach pumped with charcoal, choking on the tube that was down my throat. Other than that, I don't remember, and we never talked about it once we left the hospital. It was as if it didn't happen. A lot of my younger years are a blur to me now. I've come to realize that is my mind's way of protecting me, shielding me from the things that were and are just too much to bear. I had to block it out because I simply couldn't handle it. That continued to happen to me over the years into being an adult. It's just recently I have had things come back to me because I'm talking about it now and I'm in counseling. It's hard to dig up all the things I've pushed down all these years. But on the other hand, it's kind of freeing too. Okay, so fast forward to 18. I moved out of the house as soon as I was allowed. It was a couple months before my 18th birthday, and I just graduated high school and felt so free finally. I couldn't get out of that house fast enough. The weight lifted off my shoulders was like a Mack truck being lifted off of me. I moved in with my best friend Amanda and her family. We lived in a small apartment detached in her backyard, and boy, did we get into some trouble. We were partying and living our best lives. That lasted a few months, and then a job opportunity came to me, but it would require me to move to a different area, the area where my dad and stepmom lived. Pretty much all of my dad's side of the family, and where I'd spent most of my summers when I did hang out with my dad. I was not only ready, but excited for the change. It was a great paying job for an 18-year-old, and my dad had offered to help me get an apartment of my own close to their house. I was so excited for this, so I jumped on it and moved fairly quickly. I had interview after interview for that job. It was the most intense thing for an 18-year-old to go through, but great growth experience, and I got the job. I was over the moon excited. I got my own place, a great job, a new area close to my extended family. Life was good. Insert Jeremy. Let me tell you about my husband. He was Dustin's friend. You know, the one cousin I told you about earlier that was practically attached at my hip in my dad's garage, talking fast cars and hanging out with the old guys. One night, Dustin came over needing help with his math homework, and he'd invited his friend Jeremy along for the help. Jeremy's a smart cookie and great with numbers. There was an instant connection between us. You know how they say, when you know, you know? Well, that's exactly how it was. We started dating, and within 2 weeks, he had moved in with me in my new apartment. Yeah, you heard that right. 2 weeks. I wouldn't recommend that to anyone, but in our case, it worked out. 26 years, 4 kids, and 2 grandkids later, here we are. We had a rocky first couple of years of dating. We split up on a couple different occasions, and the second time, Jeremy ended up becoming a father to my stepson, Andrew, who is now a grown man, and a mighty amazing one, I might add. He was and is a complete blessing to us. So fast forward a bit, we had decided that at that point we would start our family and add to this. Insert Kylie, Haley, and Owen. All 2 years apart, and what a busy mom I was. Thankfully, Jeremy was a hard worker, and this allowed me the ability to stay home with our babies. Honestly, I don't know that we had a choice. Childcare for 3 kiddos would have been more than we could have both made in a month, at that point anyways. The first several years of Andrew's life, we didn't get to see him much. But once we took the steps we needed to legally get the visitation that we should have had, we got him every other weekend, holidays, and summer breaks. I was traveling a lot to and from the town where he lived to pick him up. He lived a couple hours away from us, so the kids and I would pack up every other Friday and off we would go. Pick him up and then back home the same day. Then Sunday would come along and back we'd go to take him home. It was a lot of time on the road, but I always loved a good road trip, and I'm so glad that we did because our kids have grown up with an amazing bond and they love each other so much. Nothing brings me more joy than seeing them all together, especially now that they're all grown. I was a stay-at-home mom for 13 years and loved every second of it. That was my thing. I felt like God was rewarding me for all the years of toxicity I had lived, and I was truly happy. Raising my kids was the best time of my life. I revolved my whole world and life around them, and that's partially part of my fall in recent years. We'll dive deeper into that in future episodes. We started attending church when the kids were really young. I wanted my kids to grow up with God in their life, and I didn't know how to deliver that myself. I didn't have that foundation. The kids loved it instantly. Jeremy, on the other hand, wasn't very excited about it, but he went, and we found a church family that we got plugged into, and we loved it there for many years. I'm thankful for that church and everyone we encountered over those years and built a bond with. They all absolutely hold a special place in my heart to this day. Then came COVID. Everything changed, and it changed fast. I was working for the school district at the time. We got shut down, and the kids were doing school from home. It was kind of miserable for everyone. But there were blessings in COVID that I noticed early on. We spent more time together as a family. We bought a boat, spent more time on the lake wakeboarding and tubing, did a lot more camping and social distancing in the great outdoors. And it also allowed Jeremy the luxury of working remotely, which ultimately allowed us the ability to move to Texas. The move was a lot on us all, as we were leaving everything we had ever known, family, friends, everything. But we were entering into new freedoms, southern hospitality, warm weather, and humidity. Yes, I said it. I love the humidity here, and speaking as a licensed esthetician, y'all don't realize how blessed you are to have this humidity for your skin. We've been in Texas now for a little over 3.5 years, and a lot has happened since we've moved here. Some good, some bad. The bad has lessened the love my husband has for this area and is a trigger for him in some ways now. He wants to leave this area, but for me it feels like home. I deeply feel like God has me here for a reason, and I feel like this is where I'm supposed to be. This is an area where we're currently struggling. It's something we're working through, and I'll dive deeper into that in later episodes of this podcast. I've tried to keep this brief while still giving you a glimpse into who I am. My hope is that you'll continue to listen and find value in this podcast. My vision is simple: to speak from my heart, share some of the tough things I've faced, and in doing so, help anyone else who might be struggling with the same challenges and remind them that they're not alone. We all go through fire in life, at least once, and maybe several times. But what really matters is how we respond to the flames and how we walk through that fire and out the other side. We'll emerge from it as different people, changed by the experience. I truly believe that's why God allows us to go through our fire, to refine us and make us more of who we're meant to be. So stay tuned, my friends. This is going to be a long, exciting journey. And my prayer is that through my story, you'll hear my heart and maybe even find parts of your own story in mine. Here's a scripture to carry with you until we meet again. Romans 8:18 says, "I consider that our present sufferings are not worth comparing with the glory that will be revealed in us." Until next time, my friends, be blessed. Thank you for listening to Beyond Beauty with Stephanie. I hope today's episode brought you some peace and inspiration. Be sure to subscribe and share with someone who could use a little encouragement. I'll catch you next time. Take care and keep embracing your beautiful journey.